Okay, good afternoon. Welcome everybody back. Just want to hope everybody enjoyed the program this morning and a fine lunch. Want to get an opportunity to give another hand to Northwest Florida Cook Team. The Central Office Events Team. How about a round for Mike Parks and Todd Studley from this morning when they're emceeing? So they're off contract, so you're stuck with second string this afternoon with me being MC. Yeah, this time we'll begin our induction ceremony for the FDC Hall of Fame. The FDC Hall of Fame was created to recognize those former employees who have had a unique and lasting impact on our agency. To be eligible, former employees must have retired or separated under good standing with the department for at least 3 years prior to their induction. The nominees must have provided a significant and lasting impact on FDC, either while employed or after their separation. Today, we had the distinct honor to induct 3 new members into the Florida Department of Corrections Hall of Fame. Our first inductee to the FDC Hall of Fame is Miss Bobby Glover. Ms. Glover began her career with FDC in 1961. Wow. Ms. Carter started in 1966 when I started, and I wasn't even a thought in 1961. At Avon Park in classification and transferred to central office 2 years later, working in human resources, accounting, and the secretary's office. After a break in service, she returned to manage the FDC Credit Union, later serving as administrative assistant to the Assistant Secretary of Operations. She continued her service as Chief of Admissions and Release, contributing across multiple key areas of our department. Ms. Glover retired in 2005, completing 30 years of dedicated service to the Florida Department of Corrections. I ask you to turn your attention to the screens for a video in honor of Ms. Glover.
I didn't know her personally. She was in central office long before I ever came up there, but I know of her. And speaking with people that knew her, it sounds like she just embodies everything that we're about today, and she charted that course long before a lot of us were in these roles.
Just being that example of a great leader for other young women coming into the agency. She was so professional. She was just eloquent in everything that she did. She was well-spoken, articulate, and just a great example of what you would want to achieve as a female leader in the agency.
The best way I can say it is just a very high level of professionalism. She was just when you think of a professional, you would think of, well, if I looked it up in Merriam-Webster, Bobby's picture would be there. And that was her really special trait. And that just, involves, again, her approach to problems, her approach to people, her commitment, and just the standards that she set, and the demands that she had for her staff and for the work unit that she supervised.
Bobby was the hardest working person I knew. She was very loyal to her staff, and she was just what you picture as a good employer. It's very hard to put that in words, but she supported us. She tried desperately to get more money for us, because at the time, people looked at that section as nothing but clerks.
Miss Glover was just an excellent leader. She was just always willing to assist in any way that she could. When I first started with the agency in 1986, she was the first exposure for me for women in leadership, and so she was a great example of a leader.
I was very, very fortunate to start working for the department under Louis Wainwright, and after I transferred up to the central office 6 months later, he was named as secretary for the department. And he was a man way ahead of his time. He was constantly looking for qualified women to put in management positions. And this was before it became the politically correct thing to do. So I would have to say, and he's my mentor, he helped me along. And at one point, he wanted me to take the bureau chief job for admission and release. And I told him, I don't think so. I said, that's senior management. And I said, you are here just from every 4 years. We don't know if you're going to be here or not. And I don't want to be in senior management and work at the pleasure of the agency head if it's not you. And he just kind of laughed, and I said, if I take this job and if something happens that you're going to have to leave, I want you to put me back into career service before you leave. And he just laughed and he said, okay, but he says, nothing's going to happen to your job. Nobody wants your job.
So Bobby's a great example of how a person can help lead an agency through difficult times and allow the agency to continue to fulfill its statutory duties to the state and to the people of the state during adversity. And for that reason, I think it's very fitting to recognize her in this way.
Everything I've heard and know about her is she is a class act and the kind of people we hope for today leading this agency. So it's an honor to be part of this.
I was flabbergasted. I said, for what? Why am I being, of all the wonderful, exciting, accomplished people that I met in my career with the Department of Corrections?
Heard a lot about her for years. Enjoy and hearing stories about her and about how she was thought of by our staff. It seems like we spend so much time today teaching principles to our leaders that so many folks were doing years ago, and she was certainly one of them, doing things the right way. She was a lifetime Floridian, and again, just an example of what we should have been doing all along. Started as a clerk typist, as Mr. Comfort mentioned, back in 1960, and rose to Chief of Admissions and Release. And we talk about that a lot today to new recruits and young people about what this agency can offer you in terms of upward mobility. And she's someone that actually took advantage of that and serves as an example in that way as well. I thought it was kind of neat to hear her talk about Secretary Louis Wainwright, especially knowing that he was the very first inductee into the Hall of Fame, and to now be here today inducting somebody that spent time with him and knew him and served under his leadership is a pretty neat thing. As I'm not sure if it was captured in the video, but one of the most memorable things a lot of people talked about is the litigation she dealt with in regards to overcrowding for years and how unpopular that was, the capacity laws and all of that, and how she led through a very, an unpopular and challenging time for our agency. And a lot of us in this agency has gone through various litigation from Osterback and other things, and we know how intensive that can be. But people talked about her communication style and with people who had concerns, our staff, working through that process to get us where we were today. And I think it closed out in 1993, so almost a 20-year process that the agency dealt with that she was very much a part of. Again, I thank you for your leadership, for the lasting legacy you've left with this agency. And I'd like to do something and open it up. If anybody has anything they'd like to say about Ms. Glover that maybe knew her or knew of her or worked with her, I'll do that at this time.
Okay, I'll go. Yes. So I actually made notes because I knew that once you get into my listen, I knew there would be many opportunities to talk with Bobby person to person to let her know what she not only meant to me, but many, many, many other of our staff members. I worked with Bobby from 1986 all the way through to her retirement, which I think was about 19 or 20 years, and a remarkable lady. There's so many things I could say, but I just wanted to let her know, because one of the first things she said when I called her, she said, why? Why me? And so I wanted to remind her and let everyone else in the audience know all the accomplishments and all the challenges that she had during her career. And again, you have to remember, and one of the things she did say, I thought you had forgotten me. We didn't forget.
And she is still in our office today. We still talk about Bobby Glover, and we find her in all of our filing cabinets. We have probably 10 filing cabinets with memos from Bobby Glover. And she is a true history for this agency. And we went through so much with numerous early release awards, early release programs, conditional release, controlled release, all of the legal challenges that we've had during those years that Bobby served. Not many people could withstand that. And she did, and she led gracefully, and she taught us along the way. And that says a lot, because it is not easy in the missionary release, even today. But when Bobby was there, it was probably 100 times more difficult. And she had to not only deal with the legislature, they would send her across the street to talk to the legislature, and she also had to deal with leadership, and sometimes that can be challenging as well. So, Bobby, I just wanted to say from my heart, thank you. I don't think I would be who I am today or where I am today if it were not for you.
Hey, I'm Lee Adams. I'm the Assistant Chief of Admission Release. I met Bobby in 1990. I was working at Charlotte CI, and I came to Central Office as part of a task force to implement relief under a Florida Supreme Court case called Walter versus Duggar. You may have heard of that one. You're still around with us. I distinctly remember being extremely impressed with Bobby and her staff and the level, the quality of the work that they did. And it made an impression on me, and I remember saying, this is what I want to do. I want to be one of the people who's an expert. I want to be an expert in some area of corrections, and I want to work at a very high level and produce a quality work product. And so, fast forward all these years later, 35 years later, and I can tell you that to this day, we are still challenged and inspired by the example that we saw all those years ago. And it's just, if you're looking for a kind of a fitting basis upon which to, commend someone for this kind of an honor, I can't think of anything better than to say, after being out of the building for 20 years, we still think of her and we still try to uphold that legacy and try to honor that tradition that Bobby and her staff started. So, with that, I'm proud to be able to stand here and say, congratulations, and lend a voice to saying this is a well-deserved honor.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. Just had to make sure of the time. So my name's Hope Garvin. I'm the Assistant Deputy Secretary of Institutions. And while I never worked directly for Ms. Bobby, I'm one of the ones that won't be a lot in this room that remember seeing your name on the CISM messages back in the day. So I know there's a lot of young people in here that was actually a thing to print it out. Back then, either the phone or the CISM message. So just thank you for what you did reporting to staff. You're the veritable example of the stone that's thrown into the river or the pond that leaves the wake behind you, that legacy that you've built, and just not only setting an example for women in leadership positions, because it's not always easy for everything else that you deal with in your life, but showing that with a little bit of grit and perseverance and just that spirit of excellence that you can and you will go a long way. So thank you for that example that you set.
Good afternoon, Ms. Glover. For that, I'm not going to speak on a professional manner. I'm going to speak on a personal manner. And Ms. Glover is my neighbor, and has been my neighbor for the last 20 years. She put up a fence, so. But I just want to say thank you. Thank you to this agency for recognizing me today. Thank you for being a part of our history. I sincerely love this lady on a personal note. Like I said, she has been my neighbor, and they walked through my house as my house was being built. And she said, you're going to have a nice house. So I appreciate that. Thank you for what you've done. We are pleased and just happy and proud of you today. And thank you for being our Hall of Fame.
Thank you. No question.
She has a question for me. I hope I have an answer.
Don't give her the mic. I'll just give you a little tip.
Can't find out who put my name in the hat. That's what I would do.
Miss Glover, that's secret squirrel stuff. We won't tell you.
Bobby, I'll speak personally too. I've known you and Tricia longer than I've known my husband. 50 years. And you've always been a fantastic sport and a great friend. And you deserve this.
I'm kind of like a lot of other people in here. I knew Bobby Glover off of us to send a message or an email, or not email, a memo that come out of hosting those game time awards as a sergeant of CO. My mom worked for corrections, retired as a Senate specialist at ACI, and I've heard her name a lot at the dinner table about release issues and things like that. So it's been very well said by Michelle and Lee and Jenny and Hope, just the impact and that ripple that you made in this Department of Corrections. And I'm just honored to be here to be part of today to recognize you and induct you into the Hall of Fame.
All right, if y'all would, please join me in welcoming Ms. Glover to the stage to be inducted into the FDC Hall of Fame.
That's why we got great guns in for. Okay. Made it. You want me to stand up there?
Yes, ma'am. We're gonna get a picture real quick and I'll
Oh,
you can say a few
okay.
words.
That paper.
Right here for me. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2.
You want to say a few words?
Sure. I did the same thing Jenny did, or no, Michelle did. But I swear most of the comments that I have in here have been said by a lot of people in different ways already, just for the ones who've already spoken. So I'm just going to have to wing it here. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I can tell you it was the surprise of my lifetime when the secretary called me and told me about this award. I was just flabbergasted. And back when I was with the department, we didn't have a Hall of Fame. We did have some infamous people, but we didn't have a Hall of Fame. And I really thought that they were that the reason they called me is they were just running out of old people to give this award to, but that were still alive. You know, we've lost a lot of good people from this department, and not least of which, of course, was Louis Wainwright and Richard Doder. And I have to tell you that former Secretary Louis Wainwright, who back then was the director of the Department of Corrections, but he was the most inspiring and supportive and personal human being that I ever worked around. He encouraged and supported me along my DOC career path, and he was not just the boss, but he became my mentor, my advisor, and one of my best friends. And of course, I do give him most of the credit for my getting started in my career with the department. Unfortunately, most of you in here probably never got to know him, and you missed a lot. He was a fantastic man. But I also had some incredibly loyal, knowledgeable, and effective people who worked for me. And unfortunately, the department allowed me to pretty much hire and promote the person who was the best applicant for a position. So I guess I'm giving myself a pat on the back here, because it was these folks, a couple of them still here, that supported and advised me through the years. And the result was our bureau became recognized as an essential, competent, and vital part of this agency. And I'm not going to go back through all the prison overcrowding. Those were tough years for the department, and we were letting inmates go early to avoid prison overcrowding under mandate of the state law that the legislature passed, mandating the release of inmates early to avoid prison overcrowding, because we wanted to settle this long drawn out lawsuit called Costello v. Wainwright. I mean, almost 20 years? Isn't that what? Yeah, almost 20 years that thing was in the courts, and we were under not the control, but they monitored and managed a lot of the institutional activity, and it was difficult on our field staff, very difficult. So when Richard Duggar came in as secretary, and he was the former superintendent at Florida State Prison. I think you call them wardens now, don't you? They were superintendents all my career, the heads of the institutions. But anyway, Richard told me that his main goal, his priority, particularly as a former institutional person, was to get this federal law settled and get it out of our agency, because it was driving everybody crazy. So he and Governor Martinez got with the legislature, and they passed a law that said that when we started approaching getting too many inmates in, and to avoid prison overcrowding, we had parameters in state law of inmates that would be eligible for just an automatic early release, just to keep from being overcrowded. If we became overcrowded, then the court would step back in again. So it was difficult for us, but my bureau was put in charge of managing that law, and of course it was a very unpopular solution for just about everyone, including state attorneys, law enforcement, judges, and crime victims, the public in general. And those times were very tense for my bureau and for the central office and institutional staff. We were looked on as the bad guys, but we were really carrying out the law that the legislature passed, mandating that we release inmates early to avoid prison overcrowding. So that was a tough time. It lasted quite a few years, and I was also asked when Charles Locke, when he came out and interviewed me for the video that y'all just watched, he let me talk a little bit about the prison overcrowding, because I just assumed that that's what the reason I was being nominated, because it was a significant time in the life of the Department of Corrections and in my life. But he also asked me, after I got through talking about prison overcrowding, he asked me, is there any moment, any time that stands out in your memory, a positive recollection that really was your favorite time? And I drew a blank. I said, I don't know. I couldn't come up with anything. But after thinking about it for the last several months, I realized that once this prison overcrowding stuff was over, our jobs settled down to a day-to-day business. And we had good days and bad days, but but the people that worked for me were so fantastic. Right down there. Listen, when Michelle started working I didn't personally hire Michelle. One of my supervisors hired Michelle when she was very young. And, but I had my eye on her. She was she was just very capable, and she wasn't afraid to speak her mind. But to work in our bureau, sometimes you had to do that. And, but when I found out, since this award was announced, I found out that Michelle was in that position that I was in, and she was I call her one of my DC young'uns. But that was probably one of my best, fondest memories now that I know, but I didn't know she was in that position. That's how long, 20 years, and it makes you unfamiliar with what's going on in the department. And by the way, I went online and looked at the organizational chart so I could get some feel for what the department was like now. I didn't see anything I recognized. I did recognize Steve Comerford's name. I saw him on that org chart, but I didn't know anybody else. I didn't know the names of the different departments over there. I didn't recognize who they were. Just a whole new agency. But I guarantee you, the people that are working in the Department of Corrections are just as meaningful and vital to the agency as they were when I was working there. So I am very thrilled speechless, but I'm also thrilled to get this inductee into the Central Office Hall of Fame. By the way, is it on the internet? It should be. Because I wasn't going to find, I knew without even looking that Willie Wainwright was going to be on there, and obviously he was a legend. But my time with the Department of Corrections, I enjoyed my years that I worked with the department. And this may be hard to believe, but I seldom dreaded going to work. Department of Corrections was good to me, and they did not let me down. I never expected anything other than a regular paycheck and a solid retirement plan. And even in my younger years, I had my eye on that retirement plan business. And I got both, regular paycheck and a good retirement. And my life was enriched by the people that I worked for and the people who worked for me, as I told you earlier. So I just want to say that this recognition today has now become my favorite positive memory of my association with the Department of Corrections. I've got one now that I can claim. But I also believe that there's a reason why I have been allowed to live to be in my 80s, and it's to be here today with my family to receive this recognition. And I thank you. Everybody is here. If somebody voted for me, I don't know how they do this anymore. I thank you very much. It's been wonderful. Thank you.